Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber,
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome, everyone.
and we've got some great news about Instagram. It looks like we may have solved that long-standing technical problem where we're unable to post our green screen and images for our Instagram viewers. So it looks like we have a preview there, and Instagram is able to see at least the Brazilian Supreme Court, and now they're able to see me. There we go, because we were looking
Yeah,
in
we're
the
going to be
middle there for a
testing out our
second.
switching.
It'll be an interesting morning. But yeah, let's talk about that background. You said Brazilian Supreme Court.
Exactly, yes. We didn't have a background this morning, so the Brazilian Supreme Court seemed like a fitting thing to throw up there based on the fact that we're going to talk about the X issue and the Brazilian government and Supreme Court. In the meantime, though, we thought we would get into some of the other topics, and we'll save that one. Ferrari, in the news again, files a patent for wild system that Musk dreamt about for Tesla. And what they're talking about is they filed a patent application for an innovative thrust system. Now, does this sound like the Tesla Roadster #2?
It really does. The more I read about it and the more I researched, I'm like, oh my gosh, they beat Elon to the punch.
Quite possibly, and it's interesting to guess which company thought of this first. It might have been that Elon got this from the Ferrari filing, because it was actually filed in 2019.
Yeah, the first filings of this were in 2019, but it was only published here in 2024 because it was only filed here with the U.S. Patent Office in 2024.
You know, it's been such a long time. It just occurred to me, though, that the second generation Tesla Roadster has actually been in the works and talked about by Tesla since 2017, I believe.
That sounds about right. I think it's been 7 years, and the latest I had heard on the second generation Roadster, which was coming out about this, they're probably not going to come out by the end of 2024, and it'll be sometime 2025 or later.
Yeah. So what this is it's a system that uses compressed air for added thrust and downforce. There's a picture of it, Jesse, and we can throw that up. It's called Ferrari Patent System. They're showing a Ferrari here with a bunch of pipes on the side. It looks like an old Duesenberg with exhaust pipes coming out where the engine compartment is. Substantially different looking than most Ferraris. Of course, it is red. And the famous traditional Ferrari colors are red tan with tan seats.
The one question I have immediately on this rendering is, how do you get into that car?
Good point. And if those pipes are hot, then you really have a problem.
Yeah.
But most likely with cold thrust, that's not going to be the case. But we'll have a lot more information about this thrust system as this evolves. But in the meantime, it said that this patent application filed by Ferrari, if accepted, it said, would introduce a totally new way of producing thrust. It will make high-performance cars, they say, feel more like jet planes and probably sound like them too.
I'm thinking so. Boy, it's the thrusters are going to be at the front of the car, at the back of the car, on the sides, and on the roof of the car. And the one on the roof of the car helps to provide the downward thrust as the car is moving forward.
Interesting. Yes, keeps the tires planted on the asphalt for higher speeds. You know, there was a guy that used to show up at the local Scottsdale Cars and Coffee, and he had a turbine-fired jet engine on a sports bike. And when he would wind that thing up, it'd go tick, 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 and that was the igniter that was actually firing sparks.
Okay.
Until the jet engine fired, and it was a helicopter jet engine, apparently.
Oh,
it had
my
to be a bit
gosh.
smaller than, a Boeing 747. It wouldn't have fit on the bike. But the sound now was completely different than what you would expect. It literally sounded like a small commercial or a small private jet, firing up and getting ready to take off.
You know those jet engines on the helicopters, they are the reason that some helicopters don't have to have a tail rotor. That's how powerful they are.
Really, the thrust is that strong.
The thrust is that strong on a helicopter that you can have the large UH-60 type helicopter,
Right.
and they use the jet engines to keep the helicopter pointed straight instead of having the tail rotor.
Amazing. Did not know that. Yeah. So they say, according to the application, Ferrari seems to be looking into gas thrusters, which is something Elon had mentioned on a couple of occasions. Well, he did more than mention it. He promised it on the second generation Roadster.
Yes.
Although they say he has never done anything about it. And of course, we don't know what kind of magic is taking place at Tesla working on the futuristic vehicles, with the
Right.
second generation Tesla Roadster definitely being one of those. Remember, he took a lot of down payments for that car.
He did. There were a number of people who have lamented the fact that they invested $250,000 in a car that's still vaporware at this point, when they could have put that $250,000 into the company and been multimillionaires.
Yeah, good point. So they say, how exactly does a gas thruster work? Well, in theory, it would work using compressed air, which is then released and generates a thrust. Ironically, they say that is actually vaguely how a hydrogen fuel cell car works. Now, you took issue with that statement.
I do take issue with that one a little bit. I took a little bit of time to look at, okay, how does a hydrogen fuel cell car work? We know how the hydrogen combustion engine works. It's just like a gasoline engine, basically.
Right.
About the only similarity is that your hydrogen starts out in a highly pressurized tank, and that's more so you can store more hydrogen than anything. Hydrogen makes its way into a fuel chamber, where it then combines with oxygen from the air, and that process of the hydrogen and oxygen combining actually is a reverse electrolysis, and it generates electrical energy that then goes into a battery storage system.
Gotcha.
So I vaguely is probably an understatement on this.
Approximately, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah.
They say, according to Ferrari's patent, gas could be stored at a pressure between 700 and 900 bar. And we'll probably get some technical people to chime in and tell us how much pressure that is. I was expecting something along the lines of PSI.
Right.
And it would be released into a tiny aperture, which then becomes increasingly larger to maximize thrust. Now, there's some serious plumbing there. With the amount of air that's got to move through that orifice, it's going to have to be a very robust, variable, type orifice.
It would be. And one of the more interesting things I was reading as I was researching this was that they're going to use regenerative braking, similar to how an EV uses it, just that the regeneration process will be pumping air into these air tanks to keep them consistently full.
Interesting. So there are pumps on this car, too, then.
So there'll be pumps on this car. As you're slowing down the car, those pumps will take and put air back into the air tanks, so you'd never worrying about running out of air.
And one would hope that with this much additional hardware on the car, that they would at least give you a air pressure hose in case you get a flat tire.
You would hope.
It's there,
Of course, 900 bars is a lot of air.
Yeah. Instant fill on that tire. They say first gas thrusters would only add 40 to 45 kilograms more to the car. Now, you're the metric to conversion. What's that in pounds?
That's about 100 pounds.
100 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
Not bad for that amount of additional thrust. And of course, they reiterate it would help downforce, not just speed. And downforce, by the way, can't be discounted. My Viper, for example, the 2008 ACR Viper, I had dive planes in the front and a gigantic 5-foot wing in the back. That was the envy of all of the rice burners, by the way.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
And the function was, at 150 miles an hour, that rear wing created 1,000 pounds of downforce on those rear sticky tires, giving it an amazing track experience. The front dive planes were 150 pounds of downforce.
You mean Japanese imports, right?
Yes.
Yes. Did I say something else?
No, of course not.
Okay, I didn't think so. The Japanese imports, yes.
By the way, I just did the look up on Google, the quick conversion from 900 bars to PSI.
Yeah.
About 13,000 PSI.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We're talking some serious air pressure here.
Yeah. Now it gets into the safety issues. Get into an accident, tank ruptures, those kinds of things.
I just wish we still had your GoPro footage of that.
Yeah,
You said you used to have a GoPro strapped to that thing, right?
that's true. We should dig that up.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, the statute of limitations may have run out. And I was doing those kinds of speed in Mexico,
Of course.
even though it said 101 and I-17 and 51. But
You just thought that the sign meant that was the speed limit, not that that was the highway number.
yeah. All right. We've got some comments here. Italo Garcia says, thanks, Elon, to help us in Brazil. The world needs to be free to development. Stay with us, Italo. We're going to get into that whole Brazilian and Twitter discussion here shortly. Luke Bauman says, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Instagram can see us now. Cult Devotion 1988. You're talking about marine turbine technologies.
Oh, sure. The turbine engines on marine boats. Very much that way, yes.
Yeah. All right. So I guess the next topic here is let's get into the Brazilian court conflict. The short version of this story is there are apparently there's a request by the Brazilian Supreme Court, request or order X and Twitter to suspend the accounts of sitting members of the Brazilian parliament and journalists. Now, does this sound like censorship mandated by government?
It absolutely sounds like a government-mandated censorship, and possibly government-mandated censorship by an individual that's in the highly placed in government, not by the government itself.
Mm-hmm. And the concern, of course, at Twitter is X that they're being asked to do things that are illegal. We're being asked to do things that directly violate the law by a judge, like you said, who is supposed to uphold the judicial standards within the country.
Yes, it is. I'm even with this article and our comments, I'm sure this is not completely played out yet.
Yeah. And there is a current news item. We'll get into that in a moment here. But what Tesla said, actually Elon, we're being asked to suspend the account and filter content and not say anything about it, to pretend that the suspension and regional blocking is due to our terms of service when it is clearly not. The Supreme Court justice involved apparently is Alexandre de Moraes, who opened an inquiry into Elon Musk over possible obstruction of justice since he is X's chief technology officer.
Crazy. Just crazy.
So they say that Judge Moraes seems to be leading the charge against X. He supports regulations protecting people from harmful content and misinformation in Brazil. But Musk has called for this judge's impeachment or resignation, stating that the Supreme Court judge is violating Brazilian law and, with court orders on X. The social media platforms issues with the Brazilian Supreme Court started when the judiciary branch ordered X to restrict or ban certain popular accounts. It turns out that Twitter X initially followed court orders, but later the billionaire, they say, or Elon, of course, lifted the restrictions. We are lifting all restrictions. This judge has applied massive fines, he said, threatening to arrest our employees and cut off access to Brazil. As a result, we will probably lose all revenue in Brazil and have to shut down our office there. But principles matter more than profit. Now, apparently there's been a new twist to this.
There is a new twist to this. Yesterday during the day, lawyers for X made a filing in the Brazilian court that said they would comply with the judge's orders. I personally think that this is more of a mission accomplished type of move. I doubt that Elon wants to have X banned in the entire country of Brazil. All Starlink would be banned as well. That's so the Brazilians and the Brazilian justices are definitely playing hardball with this, saying, Elon, we won't just go after X, we'll go after all your companies. But the fact is, Elon has already said his piece.
Mhm.
He's already said, hey, you are asking us to hide stuff, and I'm not going to hide stuff.
Mhm.
Elon has a reputation for being what a lot of people are saying is a free speech absolutist. He believes that speech should be absolutely free, and now he's called that out. If this judge is overreacting, if he is doing something that's illegal, now the whole world knows about it, and it's international news.
Hmm.
It will not be ignored. If the judge is within his rights, and I don't know, I know very little about Brazilian law, then it'll calm down over just the next few weeks. But yes, X has said in court that they would follow the judge's orders.
And there are some financial ramifications to the initial position that X took, which is that we're not going to comply. One of those was the Brazilian Supreme Court has applied a fine of $20,000 daily on Twitter or X.
Yes.
And they also threatened to cut off X from the country. Sounds like a dictatorship to me at that point.
It really does. And it didn't say in this article, but I did find out that not only was X cut off or threatening to be cut off from the country, all Starlink satellite internet links that are very popular in Brazil, contracts had been suspended pending further review because of this particular issue.
And then apparently Twitter announced that despite all of these harsh ramifications being applied, that Starlink, however, will continue to provide free internet to the local schools.
Yes.
So there you have it. Looks like we've got some more comments coming in.
Yes, we do. Looks like we have one more comment from Luke Bowman. He says, is there any info on the Tesla layoff? We will have information on the Tesla layoff coming up soon.
And we'll have some of our ideas, having been in business for decades, and why these things are always troubling, but not necessarily a negative indication of anything.
Yeah. You know, the reason I don't think this is Elon and X versus Brazil has played itself out completely yet is simply that there's too much international attention right now on this.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to watch, and every move that gets made over the course of the next week, people are going to say, okay, what's going on? That judge has now got a tremendous amount of pressure from his political adversaries right there in Brazil. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And, you know, you have to also consider the ramifications in terms of precedent this sets globally for other types of governments that want to control media.
Yeah.
Some of them, I would imagine, already won't allow X. You know, North Korea, for example, do they allow Twitter and X and internet?
No.
That's pretty much blocked, right?
Well,
Yeah.
we're about to have that happen here with TikTok.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
if it's
good
going to go in
point.
front of the Supreme Court unless TikTok decides to sue or ByteDance or whoever. But
Right.
we're about to have the same thing. A massive company that's founded outside of the U.S. is about to be banned by our justice
By
system.
our government, yeah.
Yeah, and it happens, and it can happen in both directions. And lest we forget, there is that acronym called BRICS. It's a loose alliance of countries that oftentimes are aligned against the United States, Western Europe, and what's typically called the West. And that BRICS starts with Brazil. It's Brazil, Russia,
Right, yeah.
India, China, and I don't remember who the S is right offhand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing, real quick, too, you guys were saying about is what this judge is doing, is it legal? Well, if it's anything like our Supreme Court, they're the ones that set the laws and decide what's legal, right? So
Right.
that's kind of why I think Elon was pushing so hard against this, because there is no higher level of accountability for this person aside from like an uprising or something.
Yeah, I will. Here in the States, actually, our Supreme Court can't set law, but they can interpret law.
They can, they can overturn law, and they can also set precedent in law.
Yes, they can set precedent, and you're right though. Is there the same type of limitation in Brazil? and equal sharing of power between the Brazilian legislature and the Brazilian courts that there is here, I don't know.
I'm sorry, decide precedent, not set precedent. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So I guess our take on it currently is it ain't over, folks. There's going to be more to come here.
I think there will be.
87% of U.S. Tesla drivers say they'll buy another Tesla. You thought that was pretty high, didn't you?
I definitely thought that was pretty high. That, you know, you hear 87% as a number, and you think, wow, that's pretty good. That people are pretty loyal to Tesla here.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, Chat GPT, what's the normal customer retention rate in the automobile industry? And it came back and said, oh, about 65%.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow. So 87% is, if not the highest in the automotive industry, it's one of the highest retention rates.
They do mention a couple of other vehicle manufacturers in this article. Lexus apparently has a 68% retention,
Okay.
and then Toyota is at 54%, and a trailing according to Bloomberg Intelligence Survey. They did say that, moreover, 81% of prospective U.S. Tesla drivers are new customers switching from competing EV brands.
Which, who competes with Tesla here in the United States?
Good point. Yeah. And that higher retention also may speak to the lack of available options at this point. You know, as the market grows and you get more variety of brands out there, you know, that high percentage may also be affected.
Oh, by all means. I mean, if you think about it, if you were going to drive a Tesla or if you're going to drive a Fisker Ocean, which one would you choose?
Right. Okay.
It's probably not a terribly hard choice, and no disrespect meant to Fisker, but they're having some issues with some of their vehicles that Tesla has grown past because they're a more mature company. Tesla is 20 years old now as a company, and Fisker is what, 6 or 7 years old. So it's I get that, but I think I'm with you in saying, as we get more options out on the marketplace, I wonder how high this number will continue to be.
Right. So here's an interesting article. Headline is, can Tesla stock really hit $2,000 per share? Kathy Wood thinks so. Kathy Wood is she's an analyst at ARK Invest. And here's what you need to know, they say. Tesla stock is down more than 30% so far in 2024. Now, they didn't factor in today's drop. We're at 156, 155.
Yeah.
I saw 155, yeah.
Yeah, so at that percentage is higher. So far in 2024, they say, but ARK Invest's CEO Kathy Wood thinks now is not the time to run for the hills. In fact, ARK has been buying the stock and thinks it could rise to $2,000 per share in the next 5 years, representing an increase of more than 1,000% from today's levels. And those of you that have been in the Tesla community, you've seen this kind of a growth before in Tesla stock. I remember when I got my Roadster, I thought it'd be great getting some stock along with it, and I bought it at $35 a share. And I was so excited when they went to 50 and sold, you know. And then I bought some more back because it continued to go up, and it went to 80 from where I bought it, maybe 70 or something like that, right? I used to fancy myself a day trader, and I finally learned that, I'm just going to go long and leave it alone, right?
Yeah.
And we're not giving investment advice, by the way. I'm just giving you my experience. But my point being is, going to $2,000 per share is not that far-fetched based on the trajectory that we've seen with Tesla and the companies associated with Tesla. Remember, there's an energy sector that's included in that. And then, of course, the robotic, efforts. So 1,000% from today's levels, 5 years, boy, that's not bad. The reasons that they cite in this article is autos in the future will be electric. We believe in 5 years, 75% to 85% of all sales will be electric.
That's an impressive number. That's a quantum jump, even higher than what our government is asking for.
Yep. And of course, she reiterates that Tesla is not just an auto company. It epitomizes 3 technologies: robotics, energy storage, and artificial intelligence. And that, of course, has an incredibly large upside.
Absolutely. And, the first thing I would ask, because maybe not everybody out there knows, who is this Kathy Wood person? ARK Investment. Okay, fine. What's ARK Investment? Well, she founded ARK Investment about 10 years ago. And she has, in the last 10 years, as the CEO and founder of ARK Investment, been probably, if not the most successful stock picking investor, one of the most successful stock picking investors over the last 10 years. She's become so well known for her stock picking prowess that she has legions of people now who follow her moves. To the point that she can influence the market almost like Warren Buffett can. This lady, by the way, is worth some $60 billion now.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so if she thinks that Tesla can increase by 12x in the next few years, a lot of people are going to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
On one hand, my thought is her guesses are just that. I've talked to you in the past about the theory of any forecast that goes out more than about 12 to 18 months is typically about as accurate as a chimpanzee throwing a dart at a dartboard.
Good point.
And she's putting out a 5-year prediction. She could be right. She could be wrong. We don't know. And on the other hand, her reasoning for this prediction, I think, is really sound. She's one of the few people that recognizes that Tesla is not a car company.
Yeah.
Tesla is an automotive, artificial intelligence, stationary power, and robotics company.
Right.
And the representation or the growth of the other three industries is such that the automobile might be the smallest division in 4 years. And it's running at however many hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
Right.
I have a question for you on that, Mark.
Yeah.
At what point do investors or financial advisors or whoever have enough data to make those kinds of long-term guesses? Because now Tesla's been around since 2004, 2003, something like that. We've seen a lot of major products. We've seen them bring completely unconventional products like the Cybertruck to market successfully. When do you have enough data to start making longer projections from a financial perspective?
That's a hard one to answer because the data can vary so much and situations can seem to be so unique.
Because you never know, like when there's going to be a COVID or something.
Well, you
for
don't.
Example.
You don't. Ray Dalio with I think he's with BlackRock Investments. Ray Dalio. Anyway, he's one of the most successful investors of the last 20 years, and what his philosophy is that history is always repeating itself. Even something as off the wall as COVID has some sort of historical precedent if you look back far enough. And you would say he's probably right because you have the flu pandemic in the early 1900s, and he was able, with what he developed with his teams, they developed models that looked back these hundreds of years and then made predictions based on what's been going on in the past. There are disruptive technologies that have taken place in the past, and there is kind of a pattern to those disruptive technologies. So I do think that the data is out there. It's just hard to mine. It's not an easy thing to get, and it's even more difficult once you have the data to correctly interpret where that data is going.
Cool.
So I just thought of something. Oh, two things actually. The picture behind us, for those of you tuning in later, this is a picture of the Brazilian Supreme Court, because one of the topics we talked about this morning was the skirmish between the Brazilian government and Twitter X, and we were able to find a pretty clean picture of the court. The other thing I wanted to share with you is we had a customer come by, Roadster customer, long-standing member of the Tesla community, the Roadster community, and he had just gotten a Model Y with the latest full self-driving software.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So before he left, he says, "Pete, you want to try this? You want to try the full self-driving?" Of course, I wasn't going to disagree with that. I said, "Absolutely." So I get into his Model Y. And I don't see, we don't see many of those because they're all under warranty, right?
Right, right.
So it was sitting a little high. It was, and so anyway, we start to drive and we go up to Deer Valley Road, which is about a half a mile stretch to to one of the intersections. And I was going to go that far and then have it make a U-turn to come back west to go to the airport. All right. So, we're driving along. It's doing nicely, staying in the lane. You can see the traffic. You can see it picking up cars and, all kinds of visuals. And I expected it before it got to the intersection to get in the left lane and make a left-hand U-turn because we're going back west. We were going east at the time. Instead, it gets in the far right lane and it decides to take a right and then do a U-turn by the FBI building there and then go back up north. I thought that was kind of unnecessary
Okay.
because it could have just simply done that U-turn. There were no signs indicating that you can't do a U-turn, so it looked like it was perfectly legal. So we now pull up, we're going north, and we pull up to Deer Valley Road again, and it's supposed to take a left at this point. And there was, so the light turned red. We're waiting, the light turns green. We're in the left-hand lane. It turned on the left-hand blinker, everything that it's supposed to do,
Okay.
but it didn't budge. It sat there, before the crosswalk with cars behind us now. And I began to realize this thing is driving the way that people irritate me drive. Obviously, when you've got cars behind you or even not, it's perfectly legal and safe to get out into the intersection, into the middle of the intersection, so that you can let those 3 or 4 other cars behind you also take a left-hand turn if the light happens to go yellow and then red.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, it just sat in that lane, blocking, any ability for the other cars, if we did get to the red light stage, to ever making a turn. It would have been interesting to see what it did just before the light went red. Would it have then sat there, which some of the lousy drivers in Phoenix do,
Yes.
and they won't go until all oncoming traffic stops. And during rush hour, that may be 15 minutes,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
All right. So finally, it's safe for it to take a left-hand turn, and it does. What does it do? There's 3 lanes now going west. Well, I'm a very strict lane discipline type driver. Driving in Europe, for example, if you're slow, you stay in the right lane. If you don't know how slow you are, you start in the right lane until you figure out what traffic is doing,
Sure.
and then you can move into the left lanes to pass, right?
Sure.
Well, what does it do? It hogs the left lane right after the turn, and then worse yet, the speed limit's 45 miles an hour, and it does 42. So again, it's the type of driver that irritates the heck out of me. So it dawned on me finally that yes, they've gotten rid of the rules-based, full self-driving code, and they've now made it heuristic where they're actually following the lead of people driving. And but they were supposed to have used the best drivers, and it turns out with this particular car, this version, they didn't use the best drivers. They probably went to Sun City and used our winter visitors that were here for the winter.
That's what I was thinking too. They turned you into a grandpa driver.
Yes, exactly. Well, then it got even more interesting. We're going west. He said, if you want to do more than 42, you have to blip the accelerator and then push a button here, and then it does it, and then it'll follow that lead, right? Then we have to take a left again, all right? So here we go again. We're sitting in the intersection. It's sitting before the crosswalk. It won't get out into the intersection, but there wasn't much oncoming traffic, so I wasn't too concerned at that point.
Right.
So one car clears. There's another one about 700 feet behind it. And I thought, well, it's plenty safe to go. That car's not going to reach us for another 20 seconds or so.
Yes.
Well, it's very cautious. It sat there and it let that car go. And then it let another car go that was coming about 500 to 700 feet distant, without needing to. It would have been plenty safe to take that turn. And about 10 seconds later, that car would have gone by it, right? So I guess my point in all of this is I was underimpressed. The only thing that impressed me was it can see speed bumps. And how it does that is a mystery because the speed bumps on Lone Cactus are not very tall. Some of them
Right.
don't even have the white stripe painting. You know how they have the little
That's right.
triangles.
That's
that,
right.
you know,
Some of
give you
them
some
are
warning.
some
Yeah.
of them are surprises in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And your suspension rips out and you're going, oh, did
Yeah.
I just hit something? So that was impressive how it was able to recognize speed bumps. Now, my question is, was that GPS positioning or was that visual? Was it actually looking at the contour of the road and it had, it had optics so sophisticated that it could see a bump up ahead?
That's a really good question. Um, and in its defense, Arizona is one of the states that does allow you to get into the intersection and then turn left from within the intersection. But there are states that I've lived in that do not allow that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So
See, that's what I was wondering too, if that's a law or not.
in Idaho, when I was growing up in Idaho,
Yeah.
it was against the law to go out into the intersection and wait in the intersection. You were considered to be potentially blocking traffic going the other way because you would be. Their red light law was that you needed to have cleared the intersection by the time the light turns red.
Interesting. So that would then obligate you to instantly, when the light turns yellow, to go into the intersection. And if you miss that, then you become a red light runner.
Pretty much.
Okay,
So
okay.
so the only real legal way at the time was you just sit at the intersection, and if it's busy coming the other way, you hope that somebody's willing to stop and let you through.
Right. All right. So that's my experience with full self-driving, folks. I'm sure that it's going to improve. We're going to eventually get some better drivers that are feeding it the data. And I'd certainly like to volunteer for that, by the way. No, wait a minute. I do a bit of speeding, don't I? Yeah. No, you don't
do
want
just
me.
a little bit. You do
Well,
just a little bit.
So the AI is now learning. So we're not feeding data into it anymore necessarily in terms of human drivers, like past recorded data. Now it's learning, and it's like it has. I think there's said 2 or 3 million people have access to the new version now.
Yeah.
So it's learning 3 million users at a time.
Okay.
With the
Well,
data.
and it's over 1 billion miles now too.
Yeah.
I saw that this last week on an article that the new Tesla AI and full self-driving has put on over 1 billion miles already.
Amazing. Yeah.
So it's something else. Well, that sounds like a fun experience, though.
It was, yeah, and it was, it was quite revealing. I expected something much more than what I got, but again, it was plenty safe. You know, it certainly wasn't recklessly driving in any way, other than the speed limit thing. I mean, 42 and a 45 in the passing lane, you're going to create an accident. In Phoenix, especially. Remember the freeways?
Especially
there are
on the
posted
freeways.
speeds, and those are suggestions. And you add another 20 or 30 to those, and now you're keeping up with traffic.
Yes, definitely. That's definitely the case.
So am I the only one that goes the speed limit on the highways here in Arizona?
Most likely.
I
Yeah,
agree.
Most likely.
Yeah, that's why you get all that honking.
I mean, I kind of like money in my wallet. I mean, the faster I go in my truck, the more it guzzles. So
Yeah,
Well,
there's
that's
a
true.
disincentive.
True.
Yeah.
And that's what one of the cool things about electric is, you just plug it in at the house and you're paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour or 6 cents at night. And it's like, okay, so I went fast. Big deal.
So Tesla layoffs. Let's hit that topic. It wasn't a great surprise because I've seen postings for the last few weeks that there were rumors and hints of it, you know?
Yeah, the first rumors and hints. In fact, I found articles as early as January of this year. And starting in February, it was a lot of people are saying this is going to be a foregone conclusion. Tesla has announced that they're going to be laying off more than 10% of their global workforce. That ends up being somewhere a little over 14,000 employees. These layoffs affect all levels of the company. Even people that we have known and talked to in the past, such as Drew Baglino and Rohan Patel, have ended their tenure at Tesla. Elon Musk put a fairly lengthy post out on X, or he put an internal email out to his employees that was posted to X and the press fairly quickly after it happened. So my hope is that this isn't an overreaction to current market trends, but I don't think it is.
Yeah. This has happened before, too. I remember there, at one point, Elon went on a tear regarding people working from at home, telecommuting. And one of the absurdities he felt was, I've got an HR department here that works from at home. How does that work? You know, they're supposed to be dealing with people, talking to people, listening to their concerns.
Yeah.
And how do you effectively do that if you're not physically present? So, you know, that makes sense. But in watching this and, of course, hearing it, yeah, one begins to question timing. You know, is this a predictor of maybe a poor, earnings report coming up? And this is a way to prepare the investors for something like this, that they've already taken steps to correct it. Personally, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think Tesla has largely warned its investors of what's been coming for several months. They said that the investment, for the investor, they said, "Hey, we're getting into that pause.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this little, this inverted S of growth, and we're getting into that flat part where there's not going to be a lot of growth. There's going to be a lot more competition than we've had in the past." And I tend to think of Elon's email, and I kind of take it at face value, where he says, "We want to be lean, we want to be innovative, and we want to be hungry for the next growth cycle."
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that there's a real bad news thing going on. And lest the investors forget, layoffs typically will involve some sort of severance package, will involve some sort of transition time. In most cases, unless a company is already in dire financial straits, mass layoff is not, "Hey, everybody's coming in Monday and we're handing out 14,000 pink slips."
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's a process that takes place over a couple of months. We've had the good luck here at Gruber to not have any mass layoffs. Have we ever had any mass layoffs here?
We have never had them, and I thought about that and I reflected on it. In 40 years, we have weathered a number of financial storms, whether it was recession, whether it was COVID, for example, inflation, and what we've always done here is anticipated things like that. We have a culture here that at all cost attempts to avoid fixed cost type items. There's a good example of a company that we compete with here locally, Federal Communications Contractors, not the FCC Communications Commission, much smaller than that, but they were a local cabling company that would go out and, cable computer rooms, data centers, just like we do.
Mm-hmm.
And the market was very strong. It was in the last century, and I'm bad with timelines, so I can't tell you the precise years, but picture, nothing but growth. Well, when we grew, we usually buy used things. We pay cash for them.
Right.
This company decided, you know what? Let's go out and get 42 service vans, and we'll lease them. And during a growing phase, that tends to make sense because you can service your debt.
Mm-hmm.
Problem becomes, as soon as there's a slight change and you can no longer service your debt, you can't make it go away. It's still there. And unfortunately, they eventually went into insolvency as a result of all of the fixed debt that they took on during what they assumed would be a continued growth phase. So in our case, we have had the closest thing might have been a hiring freeze. We stop the growth.
Yes.
Or we allow attrition to occur without replacing. But we've never had to officially say, okay, we're going to have to pick a percentage of our workforce and give them pink slips.
Yeah. In fact, shortly after I started here at Gruber, we did have a hiring freeze in our manufacturing area. We were pretty flat on our revenue. We saw coming down the pike that a new minimum wage law was going to be passed in Arizona, and that minimum wage law would increase wages or fixed expenses for labor by 50 or 60%. And we told our production manager, look, you're sending people home on a regular basis now, so we're just going to put a hiring freeze on.
Mm-hmm.
And once we get to the point where we have to regularly work overtime to keep up, then we'll lift the freeze and we'll start hiring again.
Right.
And it took 6 years for us to cycle through, and it was people who have been here a long time. They were ready to retire. We give them the retirement party. They would move on with into their next phase of life, and we wouldn't
Right.
fill a position.
Right.
And we simply right-sized over time that way until we got to a point where we were actually running behind and had overtime every week with no end in sight. And then we're like, okay, it's finally time to hire.
Yeah. And of course, to qualify this, we're a company. It's a combination of companies with around 200 employees or so, with subcontractors maybe bloating that a bit further. It's much different when you have 140,000 employees,
Yes, it is.
and you have so many different cultures that are entering the company that are diluting the original culture you had. So, at this point, it looks like Tesla is cutting some fat.
I think so too. At one point, I worked for a large company. Back in 2007, 2008, they were up over 100,000 employees worldwide. And I still remember hearing in 2007, this company was widely dispersed, and a lot of people work remotely by design. It was jobs that could be done remotely as a payroll processing company. And in 2007, they said, we're going to just put a cap on expenses, no unnecessary travel, and anything that's not client facing is going to be unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
So they cut off all of the people flying in for meetings type of things. And then in June of 2008, they said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and have a reduction in workforce. And what they did is they asked their managers to go and find all of their lowest performers, and they put together a list of those lowest performers, decided which of them were still critical to keep and which ones could be let go, and they let them go.
Right.
This was at the high point of the financial of finances in 2007, 2008. It was June when they had this layoff. There were no storm clouds on the public horizon at all. And then in September 2008, we had what we know of as the Great Recession and the financial crisis.
Right.
By the time that crisis hit, this company was so far ahead of things. They'd already had their layoffs. They could weather the storm. They understood. I don't see anything different than that going on right now at Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
They're simply being proactive, looking at where the market has been and where they believe it's going, and they're saying it's a great opportunity to cut the fat.
Yep. So that's our take currently on the Tesla layoffs. As more news begins to reveal itself, we'll certainly share. We want to make everyone aware that in 3 minutes, we're going to switch over to the Tesla Roadster podcast. It's a little bit earlier this morning because we have a special guest from Texas.
Oh, hold on. So we're still going to go live at 11.
Mhm.
We're just ending this show early so we can get prepped for that. But we're still going to go live at 11 the same time.
All right. Thank you
Yeah.
for
Yes.
that clarification. And it will be a special featured Roadster podcast. We're going to talk about all of the Tesla Roadster main battery options, all the innovators that have been working on developing a replacement product, and the most recent one, which is Resell in Texas. We'll have the one of the principals of the company, or maybe the principal, on the podcast, and you'll be able to ask questions, and we'll be able to discuss.
That will be exciting. There's one thing that I do want to cover in the last couple minutes that you've noticed that Lucid and Rivian stock prices are way down.
I have noticed, yes.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's been hitting the press a lot. That last Thursday Ford announced a price cut on the Ford Lightning, and that price cuts it just sent shockwaves through the EV community. People are like, "Oh my gosh, Ford is cutting prices. The end of the world is coming to EVs." Ford increased prices at the beginning of 2024 on their entire line of electrified pickup trucks. And they rolled back those prices somewhat. They're still priced higher than they were in 2023. But Ford shocked investors. This was a surprise price cut. And people are panicking a little bit. They've said, well, if Ford is dropping prices, Rivian and Lucid, who are already not profitable, are going to have to drop prices even further because, man, this EV price war is on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a simple equation that people are making an assumption on. lower demand equals lower sales prices equals lower profits. If you're already low profit, then that means it's going to be more difficult. More difficulty making money means higher risk. Higher risk means lower stock price, and so these stock prices have tanked. The reality is Lucid is still building a lot of cars. They still had the record first quarter. Rivian has not announced any bad news whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And their stock price hit an all-time record low, not because of what they did, but because of what Ford did.
Right. So I guess without giving investment advice, what we're saying is don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Exactly.
All right. We'll see you then at 11 o'clock. If you wish to continue with us, it'll be a special Tesla Roadster podcast. And thank you for joining us as always.
Thank you.